Dionysus, we call to you and honor you. Yo, Evo, hey, yo, Evo, hey, yo, Evo, hey, yo, Evo, hey. Tonight we dance with Dionysus. This is Selena Fox, and thanks to all of you who are watching and listening live to this new podcast as part of Nature Spirituality. I plan to share with you tonight some of my own experiences working with Dionysus, and yes, dancing with Dionysus, but I also plan to share with you some of his legends, symbols, and lore, and some ideas about some ways that you might enjoy connecting with him as part of personal spiritual practice. For those of you who are watching me on my Selena Fox updates page, you'll have a chance to see some of my imagery connected with Dionysus. Indeed, some of these images are traditional images, some are contemporary, and they're all part of an altar and shrine that I keep to Dionysus in my own home, next to the wine cellar. And I also will be sharing with you ways to connect with Dionysus by working with some of his plants, including the ivy. Indeed, wearing an ivy crown is one way that you can identify Dionysus in classical art from the ancient Greeks and Romans. Why do I call this dancing with Dionysus? Well, certainly he was one that was connected with merrymaking and revelry, including music and dance and theater. My own connections with Dionysus go back to my early studies of the classics during my junior high and high school years, and all the way through my undergraduate years at the College of William and Mary. Indeed, part of scheduling this particular podcast for April 2021 is that this marks the 50th anniversary of my very first public pagan ritual, which I did as an educational, experiential exercise while I was head of Eta Sigma Phi, the Classics Honor Society on campus, and I had helped birth the Classics Club, where you didn't need a particular grade point to get in, and was president of that. So I was in two capacities in putting together a recreated Rite of Spring. And in this Rite of Spring, we certainly honored Mother Earth and the greening of the land. But a key part of our Rite of Spring was really inspired by the Dionysian Mysteries. So back in 1971, I enacted, with the help of the faculty at the Classics Department, some grad students and some undergraduate students, a celebration of springtime in an ancient Greek and Roman way. In fact, the invocation, yo, evo, hey, is an ancient one And I learned from my classics professors that this particular chant was associated across time with the Dionysian Mysteries. And I've continued to use that to this day, not only as a way of aligning me with Dionysus, but it has passed into the lore and practices of a number of contemporary pagan traditions and the craft as an ancient chant. Well, I celebrate Dionysus and nature in all the beautiful forms. I have with me a symbol of celebration, my tambourine, which I used in that very first ritual many years ago and still use it to this day. So we have a chance to explore some things having to do with Dionysus, and I invite those of you who have worked with Dionysus that are listening live to the podcast on CSNP, that's Circle Sanctuary Network Podcast, Circle Sanctuary's internet radio, and those of you who are watching live on Facebook. And for those of you who watch and listen later, I invite you to put into the chat things that you've connected with Dionysus, if you are indeed aligned with him. Do you have a particular way of working with him? I'm dressed in purple, and that was one of the colors associated with him. No surprise, that is a grape thing, but it also is the color of red wine. So how did Dionysus come to be within the great spectrum of divinities that humankind have honored through the ages and in particular cultures? We know that the 13th century BCE, people were already knowing and connecting with Dionysus back then, because on a linear B tablet during this Mycenaean age, he is mentioned. So we know the worship goes way back. One of the curiosities about Dionysus, he has always had a fluid and mysterious dynamic to him. And in a number of the ancient cultures, he was considered a foreign divinity. In some traditions, he is one of the 12 Olympian gods and goddesses, going back to old Greece. But when we talk about ancient Greek religion, it actually, like many other religions, went through a lot of changes, and part of how it appeared and was practiced happened to do with what era and what location. In some versions of the 12 Olympian deities, Hestia actually is part of the Olympians, and Dionysus is not. So there's some interesting variations with that. Certainly those of you who are familiar with Olympian divinities in pop culture, be it Marvel, Percy Jackson, or some of the other ways that the Olympian deities come to be, Dionysus typically is present and often is seen in his drinking god form, and certainly in ancient times to the present day, a god of the vine and a god of wine. He helped the vines to grow, and many see Dionysus as a form of the green god, having the sap and tendrils and life force all flowing. That's Dionysus within us and within all of nature. But Dionysus also had other attributes. And if you enjoy looking at ancient art, which is something I like to do, I go to museums and go online and look in books and a variety of other ways, I will say Dionysus can take a lot of different forms. And I have some of those forms present. He is sometimes depicted as an older person, an older man, usually bearded, and this plate from Greece shows him in that form. So very much an older male god. Sometimes he is seen wearing flowing clothing and being surrounded by an entourage, satyrs and maenads. The satyrs, gods of the wild, maenads, goddesses of the wilds, or you might call them nature spirits. And you'll notice, those of you who have a chance to look at this image, or I have it at my Facebook page, Selena Fox Updates. This is a reproduction of ancient Dionysian art, also coming, it's a plate made in Greece. You'll see that Dionysus, the central figure, has a harp or a lyre that he is playing, and he's surrounded by two frisky satyrs. And certainly the idea of having fun and cavorting in nature is something that has long been part of Dionysian Mysteries. One of my favorite depictions of Dionysus is in a more youthful form. A young person, long flowing hair, and a sculpture that I have here, which is a contemporary rendition, has a pitcher full of wine coming out, and they have Dionysus about to consume some grapes. Well, you will notice that the younger form Dionysus, some say, is part female. Well, what is that about? Well, indeed, Dionysus is a deity with gender fluidity. Recently, as I took part in an event, attended an online event from a major museum in the USA, there was an image that we had a chance to learn about, which was a plate from India. And there Dionysus was on a cart and was in a totally female form. Dionysus is not only connected with ancient Greece, but other parts of the Mediterranean world, and in antiquity was also connected with and honored in India and some other parts of the world. Today, Dionysus is honored in many countries of the world, not only by those who are reconstructionists of ancient Greek religion. The Roman equivalent is usually known as Bacchus. Many say the same deity, some say it's a bit different, or sometimes Liber is the name of Dionysus amongst ancient Romans, or the father of freedom, as sometimes is known. And his honoring, his lore, his devotees, those aligned with him, are from many walks of life, from many races and ethnicities and traditions. Some connect with Dionysus and dance with him as a figure of the arts. Some dance with him as a form of divinity as part of spiritual practice. Those in the theatrical arts, many consider him he who gave birth to the theater. And certainly in ancient Athens, there was Dionysus, who presided over comedies as well as tragedies. And there are theaters that have survived since antiquity, including one in Greece that would seat over 17,000 people. So we know Dionysus is a very popular form of divinity now and in the ancient past. If you have the opportunity to visit post-pandemic when it becomes open, the Getty Villa Art Museum, I invite you to go there and see even more images of Dionysus. In fact, you can do a Google search and see both contemporary images as well as older ones. So what I'd like to do now is share with you some of the powers and attributes of Dionysus. We've talked about Dionysus as god of the vine and wine, indeed the essence of grape growing, grape harvesting, wine making. But Dionysus also has connections with fertility in a more universal sense. And for that reason, many people will celebrate Dionysus in the springtime, whatever form spring takes in the place where they are living. One of my favorite attributes and powers of Dionysus, him being the god of celebration and merrymaking. Yes, making merry, having fun, cavorting around, dancing, singing, having fun. And I do think that spirituality can help us with our inner growth and can teach us discipline and focus, but it also can give us opportunities to be blissful and to enjoy life, which is another dimension of Dionysus, his connections with inner mysteries, with bliss, with spiritual and religious ecstasy. A god of extremes, but also a god of deep knowing. And in some traditions, working with Dionysus is a powerful way of being able to take an inner journey and explore your own psyche, to explore consciousness. It is a good idea to be grounded in a spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be paganism per se, but a spiritual practice that provides centeredness, protection as one alters consciousness through meditation and trance, through dance, through chanting, and for those who want to do wine drinking as part of their celebration, that as well. And to be able to be in a safe space, to have the right context, to then be able to experience the bliss of communing with this mysterious and wonderful form of the divine. Now, there is another side to this divinity. So it's important to, when you are exploring divinities, you not only have your own personal experience, if you're working with a particular teacher or tradition, learning about alignments within that system, but also it's a good idea to do some independent research as well and get a more holistic view of a divinity as part of your way of strengthening connections, building relationships, doing alignments. So Dionysus is also a god linked to madness, drunkenness, and the opportunity to find some healing work. So Dionysus can be a healing divinity, but Dionysus has a shadow side, and it's really important in working with this form of divinity that you recognize that too much excess and too much exploring extremes can certainly create imbalances that aren't good for mental, spiritual, emotional, social, physical well-being. So one of the great things that I've come to understand with Dionysus is by having an understanding of the different attributes, as well as understanding some of the experiences of people that are connecting with this form of divinity today, that it's good to create a practice and a way of making that connection and to put that within your larger spiritual practice so that it will be safe as well as fun. He is a God that is connected with the arts. So those of you who enjoy crafting things may find great inspiration coming from Dionysus. These are just some of his attributes, his powers, his associations. Now, his name might be spelled in a few different ways. The way that I use it the most is Dionysus, but there's different Greek into English spellings, and sometimes it's SOS. And as you work with Dionysus, that's the pronunciation I use. Be aware that there are some variations on his name as well. What are some of his symbols? The thyrses. Some say it was a fennel stalk woven with grapevines and ivy leaves with a pine cone on top. Thyrses is a Dionysian wand, and you might want to experiment with making one yourself. Certainly, something I like doing is creating ivy wreaths as part of my way of honoring Dionysus. In fact, we have ivy growing outdoors as well as indoors as a houseplant, just so that we have plenty of ivy to be able to honor and connect with him. Of course, another symbol is that of the goblet or drinking glass. Now, he had a magical drinking glass that actually had two handles. It was constantly filled with wine. Well, on my altar, of course, I'm going to put a goblet to connect with him. Having an image of the divinity is a wonderful thing, and you might find some other images. I have a plate that has ivy leaves and grape clusters on it as part of my way of honoring Dionysus. So if you create an altar for Dionysus, then it is good to come up with a way that you are going to use that altar or shrine to align with Dionysus as you're crafting it, and then to use that as a meditation place or a place of contact. And should you need to move, then just as you put care into creating it, it's important to honor the divinity and invite the divinity to guide you as you dismantle the altar or shrine for the great move where you are, and then reestablish it to where you might be. Now, some like to have their special place with Dionysus out in some natural environment, and clearly that is something that has long been linked with Dionysus. being able to go out and to bliss out on a warm spring or summer day is a powerful way of connecting with him. Finding a chant that you find easy to say or sing and that allows you to resonate with him. So you may want to do the traditional chant. It's spelled I-O, yo, which is an exclamation of joy. Evohe, E-V-O-H-E. Yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe, yo, Evohe. So let yourself have fun with chanting. You may want to delve deep and find a traditional chant or a contemporary one, or you may simply want to chant his name. Dionysus, we celebrate you. Dionysus, we honor you. Dionysus, we dance with you. Dionysus, we love you. So images help us connect with the legacy and the lore, the traditions, the imaging of Dionysus across time, across cultures. But as my experience is, Dionysus is more a state of being, a force that goes beyond human-created depictions, the life force that is in nature. And if it is springtime where you are living, one of the most powerful ways I know of being able to dance with Dionysus is to go out and to experience the beauty of nature and new life springing forth. So now I'd like to share with you some of the legends and lore of Dionysus. There's a lot of different versions about how he came to be. More mystery with Dionysus. The most common tale that I've encountered and that I've learned through my contact with others who are practicing contemporary forms of the ancient Greek religion is that Zeus and a mortal woman, her name is spelled S-E-M-E-L-E, and Semele is one of the ways that I found to pronounce her name, a traditional name. She was the daughter of the king of Thebes. His name was Cadmus. And Dionysus came from their union. Now, Hera, the wife of Zeus, is known for her giving corrective feedback of an intense kind to Zeus for his affairs. That's a whole nother podcast. But essentially, Hera sometimes gets a bad rap in ancient mythology as being the wrathful, wronged wife, and she's often depicted as angry all the time. Well, I actually honor Hera as part of my work, and in her form as Juno, as well as Hera and peacocks are some of my most favorite creatures, and they were associated with her. But essentially, Hera dressed up, put herself in the guise of an old woman, and while Semele was pregnant with Dionysus, showed up and started talking, and had basically a very deceptive, being kindly, and convinced her that next time she saw Zeus, she should demand that Zeus appear to her as she appears to his wife Hera. Well, she thought that that sounded like a good idea. So next time Zeus was about, she insisted that he come in his full, glowing, fiery, thunderbolty glory. And of course, Hera could see that because she was goddess and is a goddess and wasn't harmed by it. But this mortal woman, one account says she burst into flames or melted or whatever. Well, essentially, Zeus rescued the Dionysus from his mortal wife dissolving away, took him and put him in his upper thigh of one of his legs, sewed him into his thigh. So this is also kind of an odd bit from ancient Greek mythology that also gets into the gender bender part of Dionysus. Essentially, Zeus kept Dionysus in his thigh until he was ready to be born, and then he came out. Now, there's different stories about where Dionysus went after that. One story says that Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the winged and footed one, carted him away and took him to some Maenads, kind of wild women of the woods, who raised him. There's a satyr, Selena, who is said to have also taken part in his education and upbringing. And there's also stories about Dionysus learning from the centaur, Chiron, who taught him how to dance. So many different versions of how Dionysus got raised and educated. So one of the great things is that his popularity as a divinity was so widespread that all sorts of stories started springing up. In fact, some scholars actually think that Dionysus may have been actually starting as several different divinities, and all of the lore started twirling around and becoming the Dionysus, as has manifested in a lot of the classical literature. Now, Dionysus, in addition to having symbols of the Therses and grapes and grapevines and wine and a goblet and ivy, also is associated with a variety of animals. And of the different creatures that Dionysus was associated with, the one that he was most associated with was the panther, or some would say the leopard. Now, he was also honored in India, where there are tigers. So tigers and in some other cultures, lions were all connected with him. What I've seen most in the art that I've encountered in person in museums, as well as online and in books and texts and articles, is the panther. And the panther image, it's called Panther, has spots, and clearly he was depicted as dressed in animal skins and sometimes actually being the panther itself. And there is a shape-shifting dimension to Dionysus, which was really pretty amazing, but also associated with the bull and with snakes. And certainly snakes connected with healing, with the earth, the inner mysteries. Now, there's a version about Dionysus in the Orphic traditions where in one version, it's Zeus and Persephone are the parents that gave birth to him. In others, it's Hades and Persephone. And he has these connections with the underworld. And we know from those who have looked into the Eleusinian mysteries, and a lot of those mysteries, is the mystery traditions from the ancient Greek religion, were actually kept. There is stuff about the Eleusinian mysteries we don't know today because people were sworn to secrecy and they actually kept their oaths. But there are sites located in different parts of Greece that have associations, and certainly some of the contemporary forms of keeping alive the ancient Greek religion have had Dionysus associated with the greater and the lesser Eleusinian mysteries. So what I'd like to do is do a guided journey. For those of you who are in a space where you can sit or lay down comfortably, if you're in the midst of a place and not able to actually go into a meditative state, this particular workshop as podcast will be archived, the audio version, at CSNP, online at Circle Sanctuary's Internet Radio Network archives at circlesanctuary.org, and hopefully the internet connectivity is good at this location in my home in the woods in Wisconsin, USA, and you'll also be able to view it at my Selena Fox updates page later on if you aren't able to watch the whole thing tonight or do the whole meditation. And eventually I do plan to put it up to my Selena Fox YouTube channel, but I actually have to drive to the village where there's true broadband to get that to happen. So that might happen in a bit. So I invite you to take a few moments now and find a comfortable place to sit or lay down. And what we are going to do is take a journey through time and space to connect with Dionysus, to get insight for ourselves and joy. So we're going to go and connect with him as the God of bliss, joy, and celebration. So in the next few moments of quiet, taking some deep, slow breaths, relaxing yourself. If you wish, closing your eyes, being in a place ideally free from distractions, or if there's other stuff going on, let the sound of my voice, the focus of your own inner self and your breathing guide you in this journey. And as you take some deep, slow breaths, relax. Breathing in, and as you exhale, letting the relaxation be all around you, within you and around you. And at any point during our meditative journey together, you need to be more alert. All you need to do is tell yourself it's time to wake up and focus, and you'll be able to surface in a way that is right for you. So as you relax, I invite you to imagine a beautiful circle of light around you, serving as a sacred circle for inner journey work and as a place where you can journey deeply and safely. And in the next few moments, I invite you to imagine in the center of your circle a portal opening that is formed of a ring of ivy leaves. You see the ivy forming a wreath. You stand before it in the center of your sacred circle. And in the next few moments, you invite the God of ivy of the vine, Dionysus, to guide you as you journey through this portal. Imagine yourself moving through the circle of ivy and coming into a beautiful temple that has an altar of white marble with a goblet of red juice, grape juice, wine that is there. You have arrived at a temple to Dionysus. And as you move to the center of the temple, you have a sense that you are to partake of the cup. And if your tradition and your situation is such that wine is a sacrament for you, then that liquid turns into a wine. Or if need be, it can be grape juice for you or some other beautiful liquid that connects you with Dionysus. You take up the goblet. You hold it high. You honor Dionysus. And you take a sip. And as you take a sip of the purple fluid, you feel a warmth and a connection that is ancient with this god, Dionysus. And as you stand before the altar, a sense of joy starts emerging within you. And you feel at peace. And coming up in your mind is a memory of a happy occasion that you've had in the past. Call that to mind and let that memory enhance the joy that you are experiencing. And give thanks. Experience the bliss of joy and happiness flowing through you and around you as you call up an image, a memory, a symbol of something that brings delight to you. Call that to mind and let it enhance your joy. Feeling the warmth, the pleasure, the happiness growing even more wonderfully illuminating. And now you have a sense to look around the temple and you see a mist forming and it starts swirling around you. And you have a sense that this is indication that Dionysus is coming to be present with you. You see Dionysus coming out of the mist, standing before you. Dionysus picks up the goblet and takes a sip, holds it high, and smiles. As you stand before Dionysus, feel his intense, blissful, ecstatic, all is right with the world joyful exuberance radiating around him and now flowing into you. And you are appreciative and you experience your appreciation flowing into him. And he invites you now to join him in a dance. And you hear the sounds of the pipes, the double pipes, and you hear the sounds of drum and tambourine, and you hear this wonderful, magical music around you, and the two of you dance in a circle around in this amazing temple, letting joy flow through you and through this space. You feel the pleasure, the youthfulness, the wisdom that's aged. You experience yourself with new life and joy, vigor, well-being, extreme bliss flowing through you as you dance. And then as the two of you come and stand before the altar again, you embrace and you experience a deep connection. And then, as you look into each other's eyes, Dionysus lets you know that whenever you have need, to align with him and to get a boost of joy, of celebration, to have your memory of this experience accessible, so that when you are in need and when you wish to strengthen your connection with Dionysus, you can call this place, this temple, the goblet, the purple fluid, the joy, the mist, the music, up into your own imagination to help boost your spirit and be joyful. And now, as Dionysus prepares to depart the temple and bids you farewell as you prepare to depart the temple, Dionysus invites you to spend the next few moments just being still and integrating whatever experiences you have had. And let a message come to you, he invites you, about something you can do in your day-to-day life that will connect you more fully with nature, and that will enhance joy and well-being in your life. So spend a few moments and see what comes to you. Messages from Dionysus. Messages from Dionysus. Messages from Dionysus. And the mist rises up, and Dionysus goes from physical manifestation in this temple, and you experience yourself leaving the temple and journeying back to that circle of ivy leaves that is the portal into this wonderful place for connecting with Dionysus. And as you feel ready, move through the portal, coming back to the here and now, experiencing yourself in the circle of light that you've created yourself for this night and this rite. Let us give thanks to Dionysus. Let us give thanks to the divine that is eternal, that is multifaceted. Let us give thanks to nature that's within us and around us. Let us give thanks for joy. Dionysus, we've called to you. Dionysus, we honor you. Dionysus, we've danced with you. Dionysus, we thank you. Dionysus, 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 we give thanks. 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 Thank you all for joining in with Dancing with Dionysus. So, what to do is follow up to this workshop podcast live stream. One is, if you had some experiences as we took the journey together, I'd invite you to set them down in writing in some way, or if images are more your thing, to make some doodles, some notes of that, by giving form to an inner journey experience. As you have completed it, it not only helps you have a reference tool to connect with it later, but it helps fix it in your memory, and it gives you an opportunity to be able to work with imagery in some additional ways. One really powerful way of setting down an account of an inner journey experience is to write it in the present tense, to actually experience it and write it in first person. I found myself in the circle of light. I saw the ivy thing. Yes, you're talking about that in the past, but if you say, I am in the circle of light and I see the ring of ivy and I enter that portal and I go to a temple, and in the temple I see the altar of white marble with the goblet atop it, and I see the mist, and I hear the music, and I see Dionysus, and I experience the joy of being in this place in my imagination, but connecting me with the Dionysian Mysteries across time and space. So you can put it in first person, and you may find that as you do it in that way, even more things will start surfacing. Another important reason for writing down an account of an inner journey is that you can go back, reflect on it later, and if you do dream work, read it before you go to bed, and you may have a continuation of some of the dynamics undergoing within yourself as part of a dream state. So what are some other things to take from this workshop? One is I encourage people as part of work with divinities is not only having an experiential dynamic, but to let it stimulate some additional research. And certainly in this cyber age, there's a wide variety of information, of images, of videos, of chants, of rituals that are in the World Wide Web. Now, that said, it's important to look at who's put it there and what the resources are and the references and that type of thing. If you're looking for factual information, historical things, look at the references section. But you might find it helpful to read some blogs about how others are working with Dionysus to this day. You do not have to be deeply aligned with this particular divinity in order to appreciate and make contact and celebrate. But for those of you who feel a call to strengthen your connection with Dionysus, then I suggest that you start a practice in which you spend a few moments every day and speak the name, chant the name, and invite Dionysus to reveal to you ways to develop the relationship and sources of understanding. It might be connecting with books or articles or with other people or circumstances. And you may find it really helpful as you do a Dionysian journey of your own as part of spiritual practice, that you make a note not only of inner journey experiences, but what kind of rituals you do and what kind of experiences come to you that can enhance your connection with this ancient divinity. So whether you work with Dionysus as a god form or as an icon or a symbol or a mythic figure, know that as you do so, you are tapping into a long legacy of humankind that have resonated with him and him, her, since he, she, it, they has a variety of different forms. I also invite you to just be aware in the next few days and nights following viewing this workshop of things that call to you that may be connected with Dionysus. When you study, you do a training, you do a meditation, you do a chant, a resonance happens, and at times, you might call it synchronicity. We have opportunities to connect with the form of the divine in some unexpected ways that can be really fun and wonderful. I give thanks to all of you who have watched live and all of you who are watching later. I give thanks to all of you who have tuned into the audio form of this through CSNP or will be listening later. And I give thanks to Dionysus as an eternal free spirit of joy and celebration. And may we take that joy within ourselves. May we be able to share joy in the world. Certainly, our planet needs more happiness and revelry and joy as we move through pandemic and move through challenges of climate change and other things. Well, let us also build resilience by making time in our lives to embrace happiness in a variety of forms. Thank you all, and for those of you who have just joined, This will be archived in a few moments up at my Selena Fox Updates page, and after broadcast, it will also be archived at the CSNP site, and you go to the Circle Sanctuary website, circlesanctuary.org, and access it there. And for those of you on Facebook, if you are not already following our page, CSN Podcast, you can find out more about things that I have coming up as well as others on our podcasting team by liking and following CSN Podcast on Facebook. Thank you to David and Jeanette Ewing, who do engineering and managing of CSNP. Thanks to Laura, Deborah Rose, other podcasters, and to Casey, who coordinates our social media. And thanks to Dionysus for being part of my life for 50 years now. And may we all continue to take inspiration and joy from the ancients in our present, eternal now, moving us into the future in good ways. So be it. Thank you all. Bright blessings.